The list of questions you can be asked on your medical school interview, whether it be panel, MMI or Oxbridge interview, is virtually endless. So how do you know what questions to prepare for? Well, it's impossible to predict every single question. Here are the 10 question types that come up every year in medical school interviews. Let's begin with the first category, which I like to call the general questions. These comprise the most fundamental and highly predictable questions. A few examples include the all-time classics like why would you like to study medicine, or why would you like to study at this university, or tell us something about yourself. Since all of those are very likely to come up in one of your interviews, it may be actually a good idea to start your interview preparation exactly from those questions. Many medical schools treat them as icebreakers, which are meant to help you get into the interview mood. Having said that, you should still treat those questions quite seriously. Many candidates for sure will have well-thought-out answers, and the admissions tutors may expect you to be prepared for those kind of questions, so please don't overlook the general questions just because they seem very basic. Just a quick plug, remember that at medfully.co.uk you can find the most common questions from each of the categories with guidance on how to answer them and much more. Link in the video description. Right now, arguably the main purpose of the interview is to get to know you better, to see what kind of a person you really are. So don't be surprised if you get a few questions about your personality, especially in panel interviews. Such questions may assess the suitability of your personality to medicine, like, as a doctor, how will you deal with stress, which, as you may already know, is quite abundant in medicine. But there may also be questions which are only about you, like, what's your greatest strength, what's your greatest weakness, or what your three main qualities are. With such questions, you don't have to link it back to medicine at all costs. The interview panelists really value honesty and authenticity, so try to be as true to yourself as possible when answering such questions. Tell us about a situation when is a type of personality questions that we thought are worth mentioning on their own, as many of you find those really tricky. Those questions ask you to provide an example of when you showed a given quality, a quality that is usually key for being a doctor or a medical student, like tell us about a situation when you had to rely on your problem-solving skills or when you had to work in a team. Since it would take a lot of time and effort to prepare a separate scenario for all such questions, we recommend you to recall 4 to 5 situations when you have demonstrated multiple such skills. We'll definitely make a video about how to answer such questions in the future, so subscribe and hit that bell button so that you don't miss it. Remember the pain when you had to delete some valuable phrases or achievements from your personal statement just because of the character limit? Well, the interview may be an opportunity to elaborate on your points. Let's say you wrote about a care home placement or a science project like an EPQ. The interviewers may then ask you, oh, so tell us something more about it, or were there any challenges you encountered, or something along those lines. To prepare for such questions, it's best to print out your personal statement with double spacing, highlight all the individual points you've written about, and try to come up with questions about them just as I did. Some medical schools may also assess your insight into the medical profession. That is, how realistic your understanding of being a doctor or a medical student is and how passionate you actually are about the subject. With such questions, it's important to make balanced statements to demonstrate your decision to study medicine is well thought out and that you are aware of the less glamorous side of it. A good example of such questions would be, why is empathy important in medicine? Or what has been the greatest medical advancement in the last 10 years? Similarly, universities may want to see how passionate you are about joining their university and see that you haven't chosen them randomly, which I'm sure you didn't even if it isn't your first choice uni. The interviewers may ask you, for example, about the things you find most appealing in their university, about their research facilities or course structure and how it suits you. All of that information is usually available on the main page of the medical school, and so it's definitely a good idea to research it thoroughly before your interview and write down a few bullet points about each university you applied to. Now, let's move on to questions which most candidates find a bit more challenging, namely the NHS and the so-called hot topics, or in other words, current affairs from the medical world in the UK. When students start reading about the NHS, its structure, all of its bodies, sub-organisations, many of them become a bit overwhelmed by all the information, which is totally understandable. After all, the NHS is a really complex organism. But luckily, it is rather unlikely to be asked very specific questions about the NHS's history or structure. Most medical schools expect you to have a general overview of such topics. If you want to save yourself some time or research, at medfully.co.uk we've collected and condensed all the essential information about, but not only, the NHS or medical ethics, so if that's something that would interest you, check out the link in the description below. The other category related to NHS are the hot topics which I mentioned previously. In your interview, you may be asked to discuss a current issue regarding the NHS, healthcare or science. And to prepare for such question, it's best to just follow medical news like BBC Health regularly before your interview to stay on top of things. And another question type requiring you to acquire some extra knowledge are the ethics questions. You may be asked to discuss a medical scenario from an ethical perspective, something similar to what you've done on the SJT of the UCAT if you've written it. A common ethics question that gets asked goes as follows. You're first given some information about patient A and patient B, and then you're told that you only had one liver and you need to decide who to give the liver to. Such questions require from you an understanding of the basics of medical ethics, like the famous 4 pillars of medical ethics or 3 C's, and the ability to dissect a scenario and discuss it from multiple perspectives. Now let's move on to the 9th category, which are the role plays, which are really like live medical scenarios. They are exclusive for MMI interviews as they require a separate interviewer to play the role of a patient, patient's relative or a medical practitioner. While most candidates find role plays really stressful and challenging, many medical schools actually adore them as these can really test your communication skills or empathy in action, okay? Preparing for those role plays is a whole different story as they are quite difficult, especially under interview stress. So if you know that your medical school will be conducting role play stations, make sure to dedicate some time not only to learn about it, or to learn, say, how to break bad news, but also to practice it live. And last but not least are the questions which didn't fall into any of the previous categories, but are nonetheless really important, okay? These may include questions like data analysis questions, questions asking you to do basic calculations, or ones that are also quite common as they test your communication skills, the picture description questions. Many candidates make the mistake and overlook these questions and then fail to answer them well on an interview, so please don't forget about them in your interview preparation. While it's important to know what questions come up every year, it isn't guaranteed that you'll encounter all of them in your interview. It may happen so that you get a few questions from medical ethics, your personality and medical scenarios, but not from any other category. It really highly depends on the university and, unfortunately or fortunately, on chance. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I hope you found this video useful, and if so, please consider leaving a thumbs up under this video. If there's still anything unclear regarding the interviews, please feel free to leave a comment down below or drop us a message on Instagram, where we actually post a lot of cool and hopefully helpful content too. And for now, good luck with your interview preparation and see you in the next video.